I want to talk about Measure Summit because I think it's a great event. I joined it day one. I wish I approached you a few weeks back, and then I would have promoted it, but there's always 2025. But for the listeners, I guess, what is Measure Summit, and how did you come about kind of creating this event?
Yeah, great question. So Measure Summit was something that it was a connection where I was working with, and I'm a fan of this, like meeting your competitors and not being afraid to talk to them. So I was introduced to one of my competitors, and this was back in 2018, 2019, a guy named Julian from a company called Measure School, which is also teaching Google Analytics and stuff like that. And at the time, we had our old brand, measurementmarketing.io, which was teaching all of that with the Measurement Marketing Academy and everything else. So we got introduced by a mutual student, which was pretty cool because we obviously share a lot of students. And so we would just get on a call once a month. Hey, how's your business going? Here's my business. What are you guys planning? Here's what we're planning. And, and just trying to help each other out. Because if we can help, my idea of that is if you look at your competitors, like the food court mentality, like if, for those that used to go to malls, there was a thing called a food court, right? I guess the way to update that would be the food truck mentality, where you have a ring of food trucks. Each of those food trucks is going to make more than one food truck way over here and one food truck way over there. Because when you got a bunch of them, you're going to have more of a market, right? So it was like, let's not coordinate in terms of like, hey, I'm not going to teach it like this, or you're not going to teach it like that. It's not that, but it's like just talking about, okay, it's a really good idea. Let's do that. Or, hey, you're going to take some more technical stuff. I can send people over to you. So we were already, helping each other out in that way. I would send technical people over his way. He would send the people that needs the strategy stuff over to me. And we were already working together without directly working together. So then COVID hit. And this was in 2019. So then we were like, all right, there needs to be like an event because there's no live events. Everybody was feeling that cooped up feeling at the original part of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So in 2020, we created the first event called Measure Summit. And at the time, it was just going to be like us doing a webinar and presenting some things when the initial idea. But we reached out to some friends. And this is a great example of partnering with people that have assets that you don't. We were really good at building and getting stuff done. Like our team is very systemized. I'm very systemized. That's probably part of that reason. But they were really good at just knocking stuff out, right? Getting things produced, courses, sites, websites, whatever. We could do the system stuff like blindfolded. But we didn't have a big of a list as he had. We didn't have a YouTube channel with 150,000 viewers or subscribers like he has. So what we agreed to was like, hey man, if you want to promote, and we can promote the Measure Summit mostly through your list because my list is really tiny. We were doing well, but we were a small list. Just because I like the efficiency of that. I don't like big giant lists. I like the right people on the list, the wrong people can leave. But we kind of agreed to that. So we reached out to our speakers that we knew. We said, hey, can we get some sessions? We had 15 people that said, hey, I'll give you some stuff. And then he promoted on his side. We started building the Measure Summit list. And the idea was, golly, wouldn't it be cool if we get 1,000 people? That would be awesome. Right. And that very first year, we got 10,000 people.
Oh, wow.
10,000. And it was like, okay, this is a thing that it's almost like when you strike oil, you're like, okay, we have to stop now and figure out what we do with this, this thing just started taking off. Yeah. So that was Measure Summit 2020. It's 15 sessions. Yeah. We did a whole virtual summit of sessions, and it's not the regular like marketers virtual summit. So we were both very anti that. We bought the books. Like we literally bought the books and the courses on how to do a summit. Went through them and we're like, yeah, we're not doing that. Because there's a lot of summits in quotes that are just dripped out content, which is boring. That's a membership site. That's not a summit. So we wanted the summit to capture the feel, the energy of a live event because it is live. And to have all of that energy channeled in a way that a live event channels it, like have them go through the booths and, the virtual booths that we have for our speakers and interacting with the speakers, doing sessions, have a chat room where everybody's, having fun and doing stuff, having pre-parties, having the after parties. We did all of that, but virtually. And it was such an amazing event that it just immediately got fans. So first year was 2020, 2021. We did it again, 2022, 2023. Now 2024 is the fifth one, this one that just finished, one you were talking about. And now it's up to 55 sessions. And that was because we wanted to take that platform that we had created, and we knew that as marketers, you need the right people on the main stage, right? In the beginning, it's people with lists, people that can spread the word, right? Help you do that, because that is necessary from a marketing standpoint. It's also necessary that they speak well. that they can present well, that they're not,
sure.
That they look at the camera and they're not like reading stuff on, on their slides and all of that, because that kills the energy of the live stream.
Right.
So we're really selective on the main stage. And at the same time, we realized pretty quickly that this is such an incredible, this is geeky stuff, Google Analytics and BigQuery databases. It's amazing. But we wanted to open it up to say, well, there's people out there that are brilliant people, but they work in like, the data analytics department of some big giant company. They're not trying to build a list. They don't even know what that is, right? But they're really good at this thing. So, but they haven't presented yet. They don't have stock, they're not really known yet, but they want to be. So we opened up what we call the second stage, where we said, hey, all these other speakers, if you have stuff you want to talk about, send it to us. Let us know. If we are accepted, right, which we do go through the topics, but if they're accepted, they can send us their videos. Now, Measure Summit has become that main 15 stage, which everybody wants those 15 slots. But then underneath it is the second stage. It's a bunch of on-demand stuff that's still there. And people can grow their skills. They can practice their presentations. They can now say they presented at Measure Summit right next to some other high-level, author, so they can build their own careers with it. And it was just a way to help that platform give back to the community that gave so much to it. So again, it goes back to that community marketing that we had talked about in the initial, part of the call here. But that's why that works, because Measure Summit became a community instantly because we designed it to become that pretty quickly. That wasn't accidental. The accidental thing was it works so well. We didn't realize it would work that well, but it was planned to work. We just didn't realize it would go that well.
Yeah, it shows you that a lot of marketers have issues with measurement. So that's the theme. I think a lot of them want to learn how to fix it, or at least understand the technicalities of it. Because I find there's always two types of marketers. There's the more creative person, social media, content, branding, and then the technical marketer who's willing to go to GA4, set up Google Tag Manager. So I think with Measure Summit, it's a good event where anyone can join and learn about measurement, because you simplify it as well, right? It's not like for advanced data scientists. It's for a marketer, which is
that's exact right. There's stuff in there for marketers, and there is stuff in there for the advanced data people, right? But but that may not be on the main stage, because that topic may not appeal to everybody. But the people that love that, they're going to find it on the second stage. And that was the idea. It's like we can kind of be all things to all people, because we're putting a place where it's like, if you just want this thing that 10 other people in the world care about, go here, but it's buried, right? But at least you know where to go. And that was the idea, is now we can let the community sort of help determine where Measure Summit goes with that. But I love that you were there, and because you're right, the marketers can learn a ton from that. And it's just a good place to stay up to date on what's changing every year.
And it's changing all the time. So definitely at least a yearly event makes a lot of sense. Maybe even a couple of months in, right?
That's what everyone's been asking about. They're like, when are we doing this every quarter? And I'm like, I don't know about every quarter, but I can see it. I got that idea.
I think one of the biggest ones was, this is a couple of months back now, but Google, they announced it a couple of years back, removing cookies, and now they've reverted it. And now, what we said last year is incorrect.
Yeah, exactly. They kick that can down the road, and they're like, never mind, we'll ignore the can. Yeah, exactly, forget that third-party cookie thing.
Exactly. You made a really good point regarding working with your competitors, if you want to call it that, because I do think, again, another one of my predictions, that a lot more companies and brands will actually partner up with people within the same landscape or business category. Because at the end of the day, every business has a different value proposition. And so, like you said earlier, in terms of like the food court metaphor, I guess you're all serving similar customers, and I guess together you can increase your value by partnering together. So I think that's a really good point. And then in terms of Measure Summit, is it still available? Like video on demand still available for free, right?
Oh yeah. So the way that we ran Measure Summit was for the 3-day event. Every session was basically open. Like anybody could show up and watch, and it was totally free. And like in like traditional summits, you could buy the recordings, right? The all access pass style model. So we have the all access pass recordings. Then we would open it up for Encore Weekend, which is immediately. So the summit was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we ran that, kept it open. Then we had Encore Weekend, which is keeping all the sessions open for the entire weekend. Now you've had 5 days to watch a session. Like at that point, I feel comfortable charging for stuff. So people that just know, hey, it's going to be easy for me to watch on demand whenever I want to, and I don't want to have to watch 60 sessions in 5 days. Like some people will, which is great if it makes sense to do that. Others just buy the access pass for convenience. But everyone's had at least 5 days. So if it's not something that is just a feasible payment for you for whatever reason, you have plenty of time to get what you need is the idea. Then we lock it all down, all the sessions down. Now it's available just as the all access pass. So you can buy the recordings and then we sell the past ones and all that sort of stuff since we have 5 years now. So we have the ability to have a vault,
For sure.
So we're doing that too with that.
I'll leave the links below if you're listening, so you can see the value there. But I want to take a few steps back in terms of your story. Digital marketing measurement is such a interesting field, or I don't even know if it's a job role or job function. But what's your background, and how did you get into digital marketing and then digital marketing measurement? What's the
great question.
there?
Yeah, my main background is sales, and specifically sales management is kind of my specialty. So I've done a lot of different jobs, but they all sort of relate to that. By the way. Yeah, I mean that's the idea, right? Is I was always really good at sales, but I never liked sales, if that makes sense. So I could, but the reason I was good at it is because it's a system, and I'm a very systems oriented person. So I could see the system of sales and be like, okay, well, if I follow this, I got to pick up the phone this many times and say this thing this many times to get that many appointments, to close the deal, to get this done. And it was just a system. So I could operate it and produce pretty good results. My plan was always get into management as fast as possible so that I could then teach the system to everybody else. Right. And that's where I would make my money. And that was super successful. So I did that for many, many years, and that helped me perfect that. The reason that's important is because that is why I was able to do what we did with kind of turning Google Analytics on its head for a lot of marketers. Because when we decided, and literally there's no real fun origin story to starting a business. It was just, we came down to Austin. We were in New York at the time with my wife and we come down to see a friend of mine get married in Austin, and fell in love with Austin. That was the only reason. It was like, this is just a cool spot. So we were like, we're going to quit our 6-figure corporate jobs and, save money for 6 months the old fashioned way and start a business, see what happens. And that's what we did. Right. So we moved 6 months later, came down, I think it was like 20 grand in savings. We were debt free, so we did at least have that. But that was it. And it was like, you got 20 grand now to make it work. And now it's been 12 years, 12 and a half years. So far, knock on wood, so far, so that so far we're still good. Haven't had to use that. But it was that focus of coming down and just trying to start something. Then we happened to find out that it was a complete luck accident that Austin is so entrepreneurial and there's so many digital marketers here, because I had no idea they were there. But then it was networking and pushing it out and building things out that came into meeting and greeting, which eventually led into learning digital marketing, much like you were talking about, all the different aspects of digital marketing. One in particular that's very system oriented is conversion rate optimization. So we went from and then we got there because we were building WordPress sites, membership sites and things like that. Because I was doing all sorts of like teaching people how to do WordPress and membership sites, and people would ask me how to build the WordPress site, so I would build it. But then I wanted to stand out, so we'd say, well, we'll build your site, but then we'll also optimize it because there's this new thing called split testing everyone's talking about. So we're going to help you with that. And then pretty quickly it was like, okay, wait, before we can improve things, we need to measure things. So let's set up their Google Analytics so we can do the conversion rate optimization. And this is where it ties back into that sales management and that systems. When you're a sales manager, everything's about the pipeline, right? Every salesperson. Some salespeople are really good at just picking up the phone. They don't care. They're good at that. They're doing a certain system in their head that allows them to do that. Others are better closers. Others are better at qualifying. And if you can extract the best of the best and combine it into a super system, so much the better, because now you can manage the pipeline. And I can tell you, based on your skill set, how many pickups of a phone you're going to need to do to make money, right? Or how many book calls you're going to have in order to make what you want as a salary, or whatever the thing is. So it became a predictable pattern. Right. So when I was building GA4, and this is truly the secret sauce, it was purely accidental, but sometimes that's what life is like. When I looked at GA4 and built it, or Google Analytics back then, right? Just that one, Universal and Classic, I would build it out not like a marketer. I built it out like a sales manager would use it. So I managed a pipeline, and I wanted to know, well, how many people saw the page? How many of those actually scrolled down the page? How many of those actually did this thing on the page to click that button to go to the next step? And then what happened, right? So I'm measuring the pipeline of my users, the user journey, because I thought that's how you're supposed to do it. Turns out it is, just that nobody was doing that, right? So we got all of a sudden, and this is where you go back to, you have to listen to your market and pivot where necessary. The referrals as soon as we started doing that and then delivering that sort of Google Analytics stuff and say, hey, here's where you can figure out, how your Facebook traffic's working and how it's not working. Like, is it because they're not buying or because they're not engaging, and maybe you've got to tweak something to make this other thing work. And people could all of a sudden start taking action from this instead of just seeing a bunch of information. When that happened, it's probably over a few months, but it felt like overnight, all the referrals stopped being, hey, we need a WordPress site, to I already have a WordPress site. We already do conversion rate optimization. What we need is what I saw at that friend's mastermind I was at when they showed me what you were doing with blah, 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 blah. Can you do that for us? And that's where we were like, all right, this is the thing. Let's pivot because no one's using this tool properly. Mm-hmm. And so let's pivot into a done for you agency, where we started setting up measurement. And then from there, we moved into training because I wanted to diversify the income. I didn't want to have to be that dancing bear client, they call it, right? Where it's like, you're just always doing something for the client, but the second you stop, the money stops. And you need to have other ways to have the, leveraged income. Diversified income. So that's why we moved into training. Plus, I just think measurement is a skill, especially nowadays. It used to be a project. Like you could set up your dashboards and you were done measuring stuff. It's not like that anymore. Measurement's a department. It's always changing. All the tools are changing. More complex tools are coming out. The laws are constantly changing. The tech constantly changes with browsers, like you were talking about. It's crazy. So I think companies should have the resource in-house, which is why we really focus on training. Plus, I like teaching.
Right. Wow, that's so much to unpack there. The first one is you mentioned sales pipeline and using that analogy to compare it to a traditional user flow or user path, whatever term you want to use. I think that's great. It's such a simple framework. Like person goes to the website, they go to landing page 2, they sign up, they add their name, whatever, and then the end conversion is like a sale or whatever, a lead. And sometimes I feel like, because obviously I've worked with different types of brands. I've seen the mess of, the user journey and tracking and the misalignment between different teams. Sometimes it's good just to simplify and just understand what the hell is happening on the website. What's the user journey? Just understand it from, even if it's just a simple homepage to whatever the funnel is, right? And you're able to identify, actually, it looks like we're getting loads of people coming on the website, but somewhere in the middle, they're just dropping off for some reason. Yeah. And that could 10x your revenue easily just fixing that specific bit. So I love exactly that analogy. Right. There's so many different types of ways to implement tracking for a business, right? If it's a SaaS company, it's different. If it's a mobile app marketing, it's different. But let's say I had a SaaS company. I reach out to you, Mercer, and say, what should we do? We just built a website. This is our pricing tier. We're going to launch next week. Can you help us set up measurement? What would be your kind of initial first steps, I guess?
It's too late.
It's too late. Oh, wow.
If you're saying next week, it's too late. A good measurement setup will take you 90 days. And here's why I say that. Back in the day, I probably would have answered differently, right? Because everyone's trying to hustle and it's like, okay, I'm going to spend, 85 hours trying to get all this thing set up last minute. The problem with that is marketers think that the tool is what they need, and it's not. It's just that there's a lot of tools out there that are always constantly being marketed to us that tell us they're the push button simple solutions. So of course we believe that and we just buy the tools, right? Or use the tools if they're free, like Google Analytics or whatever. But the problem is it's not the tool that saves you. It is your strategy that saves you. And your strategy should dictate how and when you use your tools. The problem in the world of digital measurement, specifically when you were calling it tracking and analytics, which is like tracking analytics is this big, the world of measurement is this big. Tracking analytics is a small part of that, but that's the part everybody knows to focus on. But it's not all of it, right? Measurement is what's important. Of that, tracking analytics is part of that. But you have to understand measurement as a strategy. And most organizations have no idea how to measure. So, and the reason that's important is because they can't optimize anything because they're not measuring it so it can be optimized. We just to give you an example of that. We have had a very large international conglomerate that came to us because I was on a podcast, which again, shout out for podcasts. If they're, get on a podcast if you're watching this or listening, they're amazing vehicles. But I was on a podcast with a development guy that owned a development agency, right? And it was just and he eventually, we were talking about the framework and the strategy, the measurement marketing framework and everything else. And he was like, calls me later. And he said, hey man, can you do me a favor? I've got this company and it's a massive company, right? That huge conglomerate. They've got this massive contract to redo their entire site. Right. And he's like, we're going to rebuild their entire site. We talked to them about this measurement thing. They want to bring you guys in to help consult so that as we're building it, it automatically is phoning home, so to speak. And it's telling the reporting system that we're building for it how it's doing. So it might say like, so essentially, if you think about the site itself reporting back, and if you're the VP of this organization, you're looking at the report and it's telling you, I'm a landing page. I was supposed to do this. Here's how well I did compared to the other landing pages that are also trying to do that. And it was like, oh, now the marketing team knows exactly where to focus. We did one for a cable company where they were trying to figure out how to get people to better schedule the cable guy to come out and set stuff up, right? This is back when people were buying cable. So, which is not that long ago. That's how fast the world changes. Yeah. But it was like, it's things like that they had no visibility in, and they had to do what everybody probably already does, because it's the only thing they know to do, which is guess. Hey, I sent a bunch of traffic to landing page. They didn't convert. Why not? And then it goes, well, the ads are wrong. Well, maybe the hook's wrong in the ad. Well, maybe it's the page headline. Well, actually, we should do a webinar instead. Well, what we should do is a VSL. Actually, what we need to do is, and it's just guessing. That's all it's guessing. But if you measured it, you would actually be able to say, okay, what is this page supposed to do? What are the behaviors this page is supposed to get? In other words, bringing it back to sales. This page, first thing they're supposed to do is sell them into staying on the page. First sale. Sell them on staying on the page. So we literally measure, did they stay 10 seconds? First sales made, they are now introduced. Let's pretend it's long form copy. Second sale, we got to get them interested. We have to know if there's, how would we know that? Well, with that type page, we're going to scroll down halfway and maybe be 45 seconds. They're still there 45 seconds later, but they've scrolled at least halfway. So those two behaviors are happening that are showing some sort of interest in the copy. Perfect. That's the next sale. What's the next sale after that? I have to get them to investigate the offer. And then that might be the pricing table, like if you think SaaS, the pricing table coming into the viewable browser window, and it's there for at least 5 seconds, let's say. Well, that implies somebody's looking at that, so they're probably investigating, thinking about the offer. And it's like, okay, the next sale's made. Now we got him to get him click on the button to go to the cart to enter the checkout. But when you set up measurement to optimize your marketing, which is the point of it, that's what it is there for. And I think people don't understand that. But when you set up measurement to literally help you guide what needs to change in your marketing, it will gladly do that. And imagine if you went to that page and all this Facebook traffic from a campaign was hitting the lander and they were all gone within 10 seconds. I would immediately know I have an above the fold issue on that page. Something on the Facebook side is setting an expectation that is not being met by that above the fold initial page that loads. It's either the problem is there on that above the fold, or it's in the ad, right? So I would look at the ad, and if the ad says, hey, tires are on sale, and the page says, here's your sweater, clearly it's the page isn't matching the ad, right? So that's just an example of how to do it there. If they were coming all the way down, they were scrolling, they were looking at the pricing table, and they don't click, what the market is telling us is, hey, I get it, I understand it in the way that I think I'm supposed to understand it, I just don't think it's worth the value, so I'm not going to click. And I need to know that, because it's not my job to say, no, you don't understand. It's my job to say, I need to help you understand. So I have to explain it in a different way, because you clearly didn't get the value that I thought I was explaining how valuable it was. You didn't understand it, or else you would have naturally gone to the cart. So let me try to explain it a different way. And that's where you go back to the marketing team or whatever, or if it's yourself, and you rework it. Okay, what's another way I can explain this where hopefully they get the value this time? And you change it and you keep measuring for it. Within a couple of days of traffic, you're going to see that needle move or not. If it moves up, great. Let's keep that piece and work on the next thing. And if everything's working properly, then it's scale traffic, because you know the machine's working. But the beauty of this is you understand how your marketing is working. And I would say 95% of the marketers, easy 95%, have no idea how the marketing is working. They're just throwing traffic at it. And they figure more and more traffic equals more and more sales, which is true. But if you forget about the efficiency of that, you might realize like, hey, with every dollar you're spending, you could have had 2.3 sales and you're only getting 1 or 0.5, So that's kind of the beauty of measurement when you set it up with a strategy in mind. So going back to your original question, how do I deal with somebody that's a week, like, hey, we got to do this next week. I'm like, you're going to have to learn a strategy first. You're not going to have it next week. Right. I personally won't do the work for that, because it's almost like the people that were like, I used to call this the curse of a good offer, where we would have clients come to us, and here's basically what's happened. They spent years ago $500 on Facebook, and Facebook gave them $1,000, and they were like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I'll spend $1,000. Facebook gives them $2,000. They're like, yay, Facebook. Now it's $5,000. Facebook gives them $10,000. They're like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. They're doing $50,000 a day. This has happened multiple times with us. Then they're rocking. Everyone's like, hey, should we do anything? They're like, no, as long as we're making money, that's all that cares. They're just making it rain. Until one day, Facebook keeps all that budget and they don't get a response. And they go, oh crap, what happened? What broke? And no one knows because no one cared while it was working. And that's a problem. Those are the most vulnerable companies in the planet, are the ones that things are working and they have no idea how. Because when it stops working, they are absolutely going to care. And measurement being set up will tell them that, you know?
Right.
So that's a long-winded way of saying, like, don't wait for this last minute. Get a strategy training, understand how measurement works, think it through a little bit, and then start with baby step your way into the tools. You don't need to do server-side tag manager with BigQuery, blah, blah, blah. Like all that stuff exists. Maybe eventually you grow into that. Start with a tool like Microsoft Clarity. It's simple. It's easy. It has AI, so it'll explain things to you. It's very visual, so you can watch screen recordings and heat maps. It's easy and intuitive to understand. And then you grow into the complexity of the other tools if and when your measurement strategy tells you that you need them, you know? But I would always start strategy first.
Right. No, I love that. I love the fact that it's your approach is taking a few steps back. It's not about execution. Let's do this properly from day one. We don't want to launch the website and then try and solve the mess that could have been avoided, because that's, friction point that isn't needed. The theme that I'm getting from this conversation is that there's a sense of psychology included in measurement, because it's not just about the tools, right? Because you're trying to understand there's a person behind this click. What are they thinking of? What's the friction points that they have? So I think a lot of marketers they may focus too much on the numbers and the tools when it's like focus on the person. Like all we're trying to do is, I say this all the time, we're just pushing a person from point A to point B, point B to point C. It's that simple,
That's exactly right. The way we phrase that is listening to the conversation. Like you and I are having a conversation. I'm going to change what I say based upon what you ask and vice versa, right? And that's just normal. Humans do that everywhere normally. And that's where you find patterns. You look at just how humans work. Digital marketers and internet, just for tech in general, the tech crowd in general, they always sort of assume like, yeah, but the internet's different. It's not. Humans will still be humans on the internet. They're just going to be some aspects get a little more highlighted, but they're still going to be humans. We're still going to be tribal. We're still going to be psychological driven. We're still going to have all that on the internet. So when going back to the conversation that you and I are having, it's very natural. On the website, right? On your website right now, there's a conversation happening between the website and a user on that website. And if you're not measuring for it, you're not listening to their side of the conversation, because measurement is the only way to do it. You have to listen for all the behaviors that are happening on the site, record those behaviors. And if you're listening to their side of the conversation, then you can respond easier, because they're going to basically tell you what's working and what's not, what they liked, what they didn't. So you can change the marketing, change the site if needed, so that it keeps the conversation going more likely in the direction that you want it to go, that ideally the both of you want it to go. So that's what it is so important to listen to that conversation, and you measure it to listen to it.
Right. You mentioned Microsoft Clarity. Are there any best tools that every website should have? So typical is, Google Analytics 4, Google Tag Manager for conversion tracking. What's a kind of recommended or go-to tools that you would install on a website or integrate?
So depending where you are, and again, always strategy based, right? So I wouldn't just say, you're going to need these tools just because you're a business. It's not like that. It's
right.
If you're asking questions that, okay, let's go back to what I was talking about before with that page. We're measuring the different aspects of the page. So initially, I was measuring the user journey, lander, cart, thank you page, right? Kind of think typical direct response. So when I was doing that, we were getting really good at predicting how the funnel would work. So if I knew I had 100 people hit that page today, I knew 8 to 12%, right, would go to the cart of those half complete for X amount of dollars to make the money. So I could predict the revenue. But then there was a time where we started seeing that, let's call it roughly 10% of the people go from the offer to the cart. And then it was like 8%. We're like, okay, that's still within range. All of a sudden it was 5%. It was 4%. And I'm like, okay, what's causing the drop off from the offer to the cart? We didn't change anything. We did change some stuff on the offer page, but it went down. So we're like, all right, what's happening? And so at that point, we're asking the question, how many people see this page, the offer? How many people see the cart? And that's all we were asking. So we had tools to measure that. You can use that with Google Analytics, basic free tool that'll do that. Microsoft Clarity can do that, easy. But when we started asking, okay, we need to figure out what's happening on step one, not did they see step one, did they see step two? It's did they see step one? Did they participate in step one the way that they are supposed to participate with step one? In other words, are they having the conversation with that lander that or the offer page that we thought the offer page is supposed to have with them? So at that point, now we're talking about scroll, different points of scroll, time, the idea of a certain part of the page coming into the viewable browser window for a certain period of time. Did they interact with a video and get to the 7-minute part of that video? Really specific behaviors. So at that point, Google Analytics 4 cannot do that on its own. Microsoft Clarity cannot do that on its own. But there is a tool called Tag Manager, which is built for that. It just collects behaviors. It's incredible at collecting behaviors, and it can get really nuanced. You can tell it, I want to see when somebody clicks this button, and this button, spends at least 47 seconds, and then does this other thing. It's amazing how specific you can get. But it doesn't store anything. That tool doesn't store anything. It doesn't do reporting. It just collects the details, and then we send that information out to the platform. So we would collect the scroll and time, and did they see this thing for 5 seconds in the browser window and all of that stuff. Tag Manager is what we use to collect that behavior. We store it in GA4. And then eventually we didn't want to do the analysis part of GA4. I don't think you need to do analysis in data. I think that's ridiculous. I think you should simplify your reports instead. So what we did is we have a platform called Looker Studio, also free, also from Google. And Looker Studio just does the reporting, but it does reporting really, really well. So we would design reports that answered specific questions that led to specific actions. So everybody can see the number and then go, right? Just take action. So then that's why we grew from just Google Analytics to adding Tag Manager, because now we're asking more specific behavior-oriented questions that we need this tool for. Then it was, well, how do we avoid having to analyze reports and get stuck in GA4 all the time? Oh, we'll just do Looker Studio and make these specific, simple reports that lead to natural action for the marketing team. So we added that. But that's why we added those. We didn't just say, oh, you need Tag Manager, GA4, and Looker Studio. Will most organizations grow into those tools? Probably. Some will grow into server side. Some will go into BigQuery first-party databases. And there's everything else in between that's happening in measurement. So some companies will continue to go that route. It doesn't mean you have to just because somebody else is doing it. It's right. Always did the strategy tell you to do it? And if you're not focused on learning a strategy, you're absolutely missing out. You're going to waste a ton of money, a ton of resources, and a ton of time if you don't, in my opinion. Because I've just seen it. I've seen people waste thousands of dollars on tools that they don't even use. I've had companies that come to us and say, we spent $100,000 on this dashboard from this other company and we never use it. Of course not, because it's just there to display information. And that's not what you want. They're like, yeah, we don't want information. Exactly. You need to take action, but you have to change how you measure in order to do that. I
remember now the framework that I learned from your course. So Google Tag Manager is a way to collect data.
Yep.
You pass that on to Google Analytics 4 in this case, which stores the data. And then you transfer it to Looker Studio to visualize the data. And then I love the fact that you said, it's not about analyzing data. It's about seeing the data, and hopefully that data answers questions you already have. Because if not, you're going to just be overwhelmed with all these numbers, and
to clarify just a little bit, the data shouldn't even be collected unless there was already a question being asked where it needed to be collected. That's strategy first. What a lot of organizations are doing right now is they have it's a scarcity mindset of, we got to collect all the data. We got to collect everything. Well, the problem with that is it's not collected for a purpose, right? So it's like, I need to collect all the Scrabble tiles and put them in a bag. Like, okay, in that bag, there will probably be a story that could be spelled out, but they're all in Scrabble tiles in a bag. You need to be able to put them on a board and organize them so you can see the words that those Scrabble tiles are. Data is exactly the same way. You can't just collect it in a bag and expect it will ever make sense. You have to collect it and organize it and say, okay, well, this little piece goes here because that's why it's supposed to go there. And it connects to this piece, which tells us to do this if this number isn't here. And it becomes so easy, and I'm saying that in quotes, I should say easy, but it is a lot simpler, where there's no more drama and there's no more of the highest paid person's opinion type stuff that happens, right? Like it's just none of that, all that goes away because the market is telling you what to do. And that's the beauty of measurement. All that information isn't coming from what they say they're going to do. It's coming from what they actually did on their site. It's from their behaviors that they left behind that you're learning from. And if you don't like what they're doing, change what you're doing. right? If you do like what you're doing, bring in more, invite more people to see it, you know? And that's why I like measurement so much, because it is the direct access to your customer as close as you can get without jumping on a call and having them explain what they would do. But even then, they're telling you what they would do, not actually what they did, you know? Right. And I like looking at what people do, not what they say they're going to do.
What are some typical challenges that you faced personally, and like how did you approach alleviating that? So is it a specific tool you're using and then all of a sudden no longer works?
Yeah. So specific tools. Well, it is a little bit like the tools are always changing. So pretty quickly you just sort of get used to that. Like, oh, this is just how it goes. Google Analytics is a perfect example over the years. In the beginning, it was called Google Analytics, but it was what they called the classic Google Analytics. It didn't really track users, it tracked sessions. It was the original Google Analytics that basically Google bought from this company called Urchin years ago, and they'd done some upgrades, but not a lot, you know, and it just worked like it worked. But it was built for a very different world, right? So then they do this major upgrade, and they call it Universal Analytics. Now, part of the reason they had to do this upgrade was because other analytics platforms were coming out back then. One of them was Kissmetrics, which was everybody knew about back in the day. And Kissmetrics' whole thing was, we track users, not visits. You know, we're not like Google Analytics. We think about the user, not. And it was like, oh, that's good. Well, all of a sudden, there's a lot of people that started going to Kissmetrics. They're like, we're not going to use this anymore. We're now going to do this. The problem with that is you have to anticipate what Google's going to do. And so we're looking at it going, they know they have to do users. There's no other way to do it in the world. It just doesn't happen. They were just built, they were born when there was like very few users on the internet comparatively, right? So this tool is going to get revamped. And they did. They revamped it into Universal Analytics. It was user focused. They fixed all that stuff. They connected the dots in a lot of different ways. They made it a lot easier to measure things. And it was amazing. And this is the Universal Analytics, right? Some people referencing as GA3. And that was a huge upgrade. And it sort of killed the Kissmetrics market. Like all of a sudden, they weren't different. They were actually a worse version of this free platform now. So we stayed with Google Analytics and we got really good at it. And we didn't get distracted by all the new kid on the block stuff that happens, right? Where it's like, oh, let's go do this, let's go do this, let's go do this. Because everything's got a learning curve. And half of them, you're going to end up bouncing back anyway. So then fast forward, Google does it again with GA4. This time, we're throwing out the old one, literally. Throwing it out. We're rebuilding a brand new one, and they made so many errors, so many obvious missteps along the way. And I don't take anything away from them. It's hard to do this, but they're building it it's built by engineers in a way for engineers. So it's super geeky, right? It's not an intuitive platform. If you're a creative marketer, the last thing you want to look at is Google Analytics 4. But it's unbelievably powerful and customizable, and they unlocked so much potential for those of us who understand how to use the tool because we are driven by a strategy. And so that was one of those examples where it was like, okay, Universal's going away. Yes, it was a lot easier in some cases. This one is a lot harder in some cases, but a lot more powerful. We can get a lot more granular with it. One of my favorite things about Google Analytics 4 is teaching it to speak our language. I think today, even right now, there's still most companies that haven't customized it. They don't even know you're supposed to set it up. They just think you turn it on, and because it has data, they think you start using it, and it's not. It's still the Scrabble tiles, right? Isn't organized yet. But when you teach that platform, you can actually have it speak your own language. So like we have a thing called with MeasureU.com. There's like the free community. So when we've got that free community and they complete that journey in Google Analytics 4, it'll say community complete, as in we completed the community journey. But before that, it's like community engaged, like these people are engaged in the journey. Right. Before that, it's community aware. They're aware that there is a community offer, you know? Right. So it doesn't say page view, right? It doesn't say scroll. It doesn't have, I mean, it does, don't be wrong, that stuff's in there, but that's not what we're looking at. We've taught it to use our language like we speak about it at our team. So the platform is now kind of in a weird way like a team member. It understands our language. So that's just an example of a tool that constantly changes. The reason I don't see it like in a negative way is because the variability in life, the volatility in life is what creates the value in life. If things didn't change, there would be no value. Everything would be equilibrium, it'd be boring, it'd be a straight line, and it'd be neutral. Everything would be beige. You need to have contrast, and that's why the volatility is important. The more, and this is just my default setting, the more volatile a situation, the calmer I get, because I can feel the value. And my job is to be very aware so I can pinpoint where it's going to be and then go after it. So for me, the volatility, the change, all that stuff, the challenge is just a sign that value is here and I need to dig deeper into it. So I get more motivated through it.
Right. It reminds me of a concept that, I don't know if you know Nassim Taleb, he has a book called Anti-Fragility.
Yes. Anti-fragile.
So it's all about these things that happen in life that, things fluctuate. You want to be anti-fragile where you're almost expecting it to happen.
And
so
it's not even almost. It's not even almost. You expect it to happen. You're like, oh, okay, this is just the part where it gets bumpy.
Yeah, and then everyone panics. You've already kind of strategized and expected, forecasted what's going to happen.
We did that as a true story of that was when COVID hit. Something that didn't occur to me just as an entrepreneur was the team was freaking out. And one day on a call, they were like, hey, are we going to be okay? Like, are we all going to get paid still? Because no one knew back then what was going to go on. And what I did as an owner, like I anticipate the black swan, right? Those black swan events. I am always like, that black swan is out there somewhere. There's going to be some mutation that I'm not expecting that's going to hit us, from left field. And I have no idea what it's going to be. In this case, it was kind of the pandemic in a way. But I had a reserve account for it. So we had 3 months of salary, just always. I would always prepared for that. Because not that we expect revenue to drop to zero overnight, but if it did, I wanted at least 90 days with incredible people that we've got on our team. We'll build something. We'll figure it out. And so once I happened to have that, not realizing I was planning to answer that question in that way, but it was useful as an owner to be able to say, hey, we got you. Like we're way prepared for this because in a way we prepared for a pandemic without realizing we were, because of that, we expected the unexpected.
I know you mentioned savings and liquid cash, and I think that's it's such a fair thing for a founder to do because sometimes we forget when you have employees that these are actually people with lives behind the screen and
it's a whole other family you're supporting in a way.
100%. Yeah, you're providing value in that sense.
In our company, we call it TBV. We always reference it as TBV, but it's trust but verify. So you trust things are going to go well, but immediately you sort of turn your hat around and be like, okay, now I'm going to go look for all the errors because they're there. And and most people, when they're doing that, they're double checking to make sure they're right. So you look for where you're right. So you miss the obvious errors. Right. So we try to train the team, always look for where the errors are or could be and expect to find them. And then if you can't, then you must have done it right. But that's how you know if you did it right. You cannot find errors that you looked for. And so much so, sometimes we give it to another person where it's like, I've seen this a million times. I'm now banner blind to the errors, right? So you give it to somebody else and they point out 7 of them. You're like, oh my gosh, I had 8 misspellings, But trust but verify, it's a huge rule. So I love that.
100%. Do you have any predictions for digital marketing measurement and maybe marketing in general? What's your take there? I
think kind of what we talked about earlier on, there's going to be a huge community focus. I think communities are going to be so very important to brands that need that as an asset. Another touch point to communicate with their market, right? You'll do it over email, you can do it over social, but there's nothing like your own community to do that. A real community of value, not some BS community where they just, sign up and do. You have to participate. You have to help them, right? Generate value from that. And I think that'll help it grow. So I think a lot of stuff is going that direction. I think that's good. The other thing that I think will become so much more important is the power of brand. And I'm not talking about like the old school 1950s, Mad Men style branding thing, at least not directly. But the power of brand is going to be so important because of the avalanche of crap we are all about to get because of AI. It's going to get exponentially worse for a long, long, long time. Right? Where you're going to have 85 different versions of me out there saying stuff that I never said and you never said, and blog posts that are being generated off the stuff that we both wrote but are now over here. And it's just going to be a cluster. That's going to happen. So that's one of those things where I'm like, I'm not going to bury my head in the sand and be like, no, humans are going to be better than that. I'm like, no, they won't. They're going to automate and bot out everything. And it'll be a bunch of 15-year-olds that are doing it because they're the ones that are native to the tech. So they're going to think it's no big deal. How do I know this? Because I used to be that 15-year-old. I just did it for my generation back then, right? Same concepts. So have the community and then focus on what your brand means and work on branding. Because when your content comes through, but it comes through your brand and that means something to me, you're shortcutting the trust. So now I automatically trust what you say more than this other brand, if there is a brand, that says the exact same thing. I'm going to hear yours. I'm going to connect with you because you're a brand I trust, because you took the time to think it through and give me ways to connect. That's not just your company name. It's the brand of brands. You create your products are a brand. The way you service your products are a brand, right? So like we have measurement marketing is a kind of a brand on its own. That's the thing we teach is measurement marketing. We've got measureyou.com, which is the main brand. We've got the measurement marketing framework, which is a brand, right? When we do our courses, we call them win courses. Those are all brands. So it's like everything's a brand of a brand of a brand. And because of that, when they come into our platform, they're like, oh, this is like a thing, not some guy's website. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of some guys' websites is what's going to happen with AI. Some person's website, doesn't have to be a guy, obviously, but just some person's website. It's going to be just miscellaneous junk out there. And the power of brand is how the human brain is going to sift through it, because our brains look for shortcuts. And brand, from a marketing perspective, is how we make those shortcuts. So I think getting really good at understanding brand, concerning yourselves what the logo looks like, how it's going to be laid out. Are you going to, like I'm wearing the Profit School shirt right now. I'm not happy because I don't have a Measure You branded, hat on. I still have the old measurement marketing.io thing. So it's like you need those brands out there to connect with the community. So that's kind of where I see it going.
Yeah, I agree. I think branding and building that trust with your audience is the best insurance policy, especially post AI, because AI can't quite replicate it. And
human as a service is going to make a comeback. That'll be the other thing. Is like, oh, we actually have humans that do the work. Oh, really? Thank God. Because I'm so tired of dealing with bots that, spend a bunch of money or go some other direction. That'll be the other thing to look at.
Well, that's one of my predictions. We could easily go on a tangent, but human as a service. Maybe we'll do a session at some point next year. We can expand.
I like it. Yeah. Where are we now? Right. A year later. That's cool.
Exactly. Yep. HAAS, I guess. HAAS, human as a service.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of closing off, final question from my side. If a marketer is watching this who doesn't know anything about measurement, maybe they do SEO, they're a social media manager or a brand manager. Do you have any kind of general advice to kind of get them into like the technicalities of measurement and marketing? Shameless plug, of course, for measurement stuff, go to measureyou.com, right? If you're looking for a business operations training, profitschool.com. We have those things there. We have the free communities there. So you've got plenty to learn for us to prove that there's more for you to learn and it's worth doing, right? So and if it's not, it's not. So be it. If that's not your cup of tea, which I get, I would use YouTube. Like, go watch this stuff. YouTube is such an incredible place for content. So go there and ask questions about it. You could use AI, and I think AI will hopefully get you into something like a YouTube, because you should do a little more long form. Podcasts are a great place to learn like this, because you can have these conversations around things, and it's not 140 character hot takes all the time, because that's just not useful, right? Headlines don't sell. Headlines just get attention, and that's the problem, is too much attention economy. And that's the human body the brains will change. That won't work forever, because it'll become a pattern that we'll recognize and be like, oh, never mind, I don't want that. So learn anywhere you can do deep form communication, right? Some sort of deep connection. And then when you're practicing, if you're just starting out in this, you're trying to get a business around measurement, join the communities. Again, whether it's ours or somebody else's, it honestly doesn't matter. It could be a Facebook group. Help them measure their stuff. That's it. You go in there and you say, hey, with Google Analytics, you could do this, and this. I can show you how to do it. Here's where you do it. What happens pretty quickly is people start DMing you, or they start recommending you. And they're like, hey, I know you helped this other person in the group. Really appreciate that. Can we jump on a call so you can show me? And then all of a sudden, now you've got a business. Same thing works obviously with marketing and everything else. Right. No, I love that. Do you want to quickly plug all of your businesses? Because there's so many. I'll let you kind of structure it in a way, but I think maybe emphasize the community you're launching next week.
Yeah. So technically, whenever this drops, I don't know if this goes live right away, but
I'll try and do it within 2 weeks.
Okay, perfect. So by the time everyone's watching this, it should already be launched. So measureyou.com is where you're going to go. And then when you go there, you'll see be able to sign up for the community and everything else there. So that is the one for anything measurement oriented and everything measurement oriented. So there's nothing that we don't teach back there in relation to measurement. So if you're looking for those of you that are a little more complicated and you want the server side and CAPI stuff and everything else, all of that's there. If you're trying to do database, data warehousing, all of that's there. And if you're just trying to figure out, like, gosh, I'm just trying to figure out if my Facebook ad is working or not, that's also there, right? So we start everybody, but we sort of have a self-contained community that no matter where you start, you can grow your skills, which is nice. That's Measure You. If you're more on the business owner, specifically small businesses, teams of less than 15 people, we felt there was a need for small business owners to understand how to manage teams, and especially the teams now, which is distributed for the most of us, right? And so we have Profit School, where it teaches business systems, operations training, so that the owner who was really good at SEO and was a freelancer, but all of a sudden they've got a couple of VAs, and now they're like, oh crap, they're giving me more work, and they should be doing the work. And how am I here? Well, I should just fire everybody and start over. Like, when you start having those feelings, that's Profit School. Go to Profit School. We'll help you out with that, because you're using a system that's causing that. You just don't realize it. So we help you identify that and then change it, so you can become an owner again, and kind of get out of the way and let the team build the company instead of you building the company. So that's Profit School. So measureyou.com, profitschool.com. The third one we talked about, which is Measure Summit, that's a really good one just for the virtual event. So measuresummit.com, anybody interested in that. That is really, if you're really into this crowd and you're into this measurement stuff, for sure, measuresummit.com. But that's a once a year event that we do. So the next one won't be till probably October 2025 at this point. So I would point them to measureyou.com or profitschool.com.
Measure You. Cool. If you're listening, I'll leave the links in the show notes. So that's Measure You, Profit School, and Measure Summit, which will happen again next year, 2025.
Exactly right.
Awesome. All right, Mercer, man. Thanks for jumping on, man. Really, really good session. There's so many interesting lessons there. Any closing statements?
If anyone's listening to this and you feel like overwhelmed, you think there's a lot of stuff going on, because there's a lot with AI and automation. There's a lot with digital marketing as an industry. There's a lot with measurement as an industry. There's a lot with business as a thing. It's so easy to get overwhelmed. I would just focus on, okay, what's the strategy that I'm using, and see if there's a strategy missing. Because most of the time when you feel overwhelmed, it's because you've got too many things going for your attention and there's no way for you to filter it. So try to think through, okay, what's the way I can filter through and prioritize? And half the time is just keep it as simple as you possibly can to get the most useful action from what you're about to take. Just to dive in action. So if you're thinking about what tool to use, you got 15 different tools to choose from. What's the easiest, simplest tool for you to get started with? That's the one you do. Keep it simple.
All right. Awesome. Sounds good, man. Thanks, Mercer.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate you having me, man.